Last week, Michael Avenatti, the boisterous attorney for adult film star Stormy Daniels, was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison after attempting to extort Nike for $25 million. Avenatti also faces charges in California for fraud and tax evasion. But if you were watching liberal news media, you'd be forgiven if you didn't know any of this. MSNBC dedicated just under 2 minutes of airtime to the attorney's sentencing after inviting him on over 100 times in his heyday.
Journalist Glenn Greenwald pointed out on Twitter liberal media's infatuation with Avenatti, including the time anchor Rachel Maddow invited the attorney on to discuss Julie Swetnick, a Brett Kavanaugh accuser whose account was later reported to have serious issues. That was fairly clear at the time. Let's take a look at that.
The person we have been hoping to talk to tonight is attorney Michael Avenatti. You may have met him first through his work representing Stormy Daniels and her legal challenges to the president. Mr. Avenatti has exposed the president's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, and the companies that had to admit to paying him millions of dollars. Mr. Avenatti has also worked on reuniting families who were forcibly separated at the border by Trump administration policy. Mr. Avenatti has become part of our national politics now.
So, Ryan, this case study is one that I think it's been playing out, and it's been very clear for a long time that the media fell hook, line, and sinker for the Avenatti shtick because he was anti-Trump and because he was telegenic, because they could gin up this, controversy. He was going to run for president. He was in Iowa. And we had this just absolutely nauseating news cycle for Avenatti that seems to go on for months. But what I have found most interesting is the reporting that's come out since. And some of this is months old at this point because we've learned more and more about how awful of a person he seems to be as all of this has unfolded. There's plenty of reporting that shows he was acting like a jerk in green rooms across the legacy media, that people knew he was clearly a man of questionable character. He was berating people. He was shouting at people behind closed doors and over the phone. And reporters knew this because they were the subject of much of his outrage and anger. And yet he continued to get these spots on television over and over and over again.
I think that was partly the media was completely lost and couldn't figure out how to respond to Donald Trump. They saw Donald Trump doing all of these crazy things that they kept saying, well, that's it for Donald Trump. Yeah. He just said, McCain's a loser. I prefer my war heroes who don't get captured. And the media's like, okay, well, so much for Donald Trump. And then his numbers go up. And then, what's going on here? And so that opened a space for somebody like Avenatti to be this bull in a green room and the media to say, well, actually, our gut tells us that this is wrong and this is off. But our gut also told us that Trump was wrong and off. So maybe you actually need a brash lunatic like Avenatti to counter a brash lunatic like Trump. And they just keep inviting the guy on. And also, we can't underestimate the role that ratings play. He'd come on, and the ratings would go up. Yeah. And so they bring him back on. Right. So in some ways, it's that simple.
No, I do think it's that simple. I think, although, one thing that's interesting is I've actually gone back a couple of times as all of this has unfolded and looked at the nature of the coverage. So not just the volume of it, but how they were talking about him and how they were talking to him. And he was given, really cushy treatment, like very flowery language used to describe him and really pump him up and treat him as though he were someone of high character. And that's what's so interesting to me is the juxtaposition between what we now know they were seeing behind the scenes and how they were treating him on television. I think the ratings point is absolutely accurate and a good one, but I think it also underscores the total lack of character the people in the media who lecture us constantly about character actually have on their own.
Yeah, and he also misunderstood what his own assets were. Leading up to his sentencing, Avenatti reportedly pleaded to the White House for help, writing several letters that President Biden never saw.
Shocking.
So you see people like this in politics all the time who kind of flame into the orbit and then think that because they've been buddy-buddy with people that their friends in the system are going to take care of them. They don't understand that once they're no longer useful to the system has no use for them.
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, what happened, though, is his treatment is what enabled him to lob these absolutely batshit allegations from Julie Swetnick into the discourse during the Kavanaugh confirmation. And so it's a reminder that there are actually very real consequences. And by the way, consequences to legitimate survivors of sexual assault, credible survivors of sexual assault, when we we have to litigate these thin cases in the public square in these moments of high political pressure, it does a disservice to all of us. And he was enabled to do that by the treatment the legacy media gave him. There are real consequences to that nonsense. He's as good an example as any of what those look like and how bad they can be.
I also think Swetnick's interview probably cinched Kavanaugh's confirmation.
It may have. That's a good point. It really may have, because it was clear to so many people that this was becoming excessive. And Avenatti was just salivating over it in his media appearances. And people aren't stupid. They see what's happening. And I think it just was one of those things that infuriated absolutely so many people to see what was happening and see how it was playing out. And Avenatti the whole time is loving it. He was loving it. And that didn't, I think you're absolutely right. That actually was counterproductive to the cause if you supported Kavanaugh.
Right. It allowed Republicans to not deal with the Christine Blasey Ford allegations and to say, and to elevate those and then knock those down and say, we just need to move on and get this over with.
I mean, it definitely didn't help combat the narrative that these were allegations being weaponized for political purposes. It actually was very clearly an example of that happening, so it definitely gave Republicans something more to work with. Absolutely.
And we'll have more Rising for you right after this.